Hey y'all, welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, Recruiting in Yoga Pants. As promised, I am tackling the topic that we did a poll on recently, a week ago I think it was, and we're going to talk about whether or not job seekers should include a company description on their resume. The votes are in, friends. You can see whatever side I end up putting it on. You can see the graphic here with the votes. Basically, we had, not surprisingly, a split decision, over 2,000 votes, so a decent sample size. And majority, 42% of recruiters said, nope, not necessary. I'll Google it. I like you. Another 26% said yes, they do want to see that. And about 19% were like, maybe. It depends. Like so many things in recruiting, it depends. You know, I changed my mind multiple times. Reading through the comments and as I was, kind of even thinking about my own resume, could I benefit from maybe a little explanation? I think yes, after reading through some of this. I'm going to explain why, but I've come to the decision, as usual, it depends. I will, if I were voting, 100% it depends. I do feel like there's a personal preference element here. What does the job seeker want to do? What do you want on your resume? Do you feel better having an explanation on there? Does it make sense? Does it make you feel good about the data you're providing? That is the number one reason to do it or not do it. If you find it helpful, valuable, or insightful, then you should. So that's number one. I would very much be, it depends very much on the job seeker to decide what they find valuable. That said, there are two specific instances where I'm going to encourage you to consider maybe adding a little note. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about a paragraph here. I'm not talking about a lengthy, multiple sentence. You don't have that much real estate on your resume probably, right? So you may not want to use that space for something like this that may or may not be super relevant. One sentence, brief description is totally fine. One of the reasons that I would suggest doing this, we're going to get into right now, and this would be my reason for doing it on my own resume. Several recruiters weighed in and said, well, if you work for a big company, you don't have to. Fortune 100, everybody's heard of them. It's not necessary. I'm going to disagree with you. And specifically, I'm going to say, if the company is a ginormous Fortune 100, whatever, owned by a billionaire, maybe, who knows, everybody's heard of it, household name, sometimes those companies might be known for a very specific thing. And you might be working on something that has nothing to do with that very specific thing. Okay? I'm going to give you an example. If I were to say, I work at Google, there could very quickly be a lot of assumptions about the kind of work I do, the environment that I work in, how I do my job, things like that, right? Everybody thinks Google's all like snacks and nap pods. And they have those, but that's not all. But if you're, there's a distinction in the profile, in the persona, in the resume, in the kind of work that you do, and the accomplishments that you have of a, SDE2 in Mountain View versus the IT guy at a data center in North Dakota. Very different skills, very different culture, environment, things like that you might be working in. So if you are worried that there is a risk that someone is going to make assumptions about your employer based on the well-known status of said employer, it might make sense for you to add a little qualifier. I would do this on my own resume. And I didn't think I would do this before this poll. So I learned something and changed my mind from what people said on the internet. Oh my God. Who knew? Who saw that coming? But because I do work for a household name, not to be named on this channel, but many of you come here from LinkedIn, so I know you know. I do work for a very large, well-known company that's known for a pretty specific thing. But the business group I recruit for, so different. So different. I mean, the challenges I've seen over the last 5 years, the startup nature of the early years, the stealth mode that we were in, all of those kinds of things have given me a very different set of experiences and accomplishments compared to my peers who work in the more traditional lines of business. This is not to diminish their hard work. They're great too, okay? They're doing cool stuff. They're working hard. They're solving very different but yet equally complex problems. But the work that I do has literally never been done anywhere else in the org. I'm going to call that out. So I made up my mind. After this poll, after this discussion, 380 some odd comments, I was like, oh dang, people do make a lot of assumptions. I need to get ahead of that on my resume. So I'll be doing that. So that's scenario one. You work for a commonly known household name. It's maybe not a good explanation of what you personally do or are involved in or are responsible for. Go ahead, add a little qualifier. We can also make the argument that those qualifiers can very easily be explained in the bullet points listing your accomplishments. I agree with this. So do I think a one-sentence description of the company or the program or the business group is required? Absolutely not. If you feel confident that you can set the right tone and create the right mental picture for the person reading through your bullet points, you don't need it. It's up to you. Either or both, totally fine with me. The second scenario where I think this is helpful is if you work for an absolute unknown. Okay? Maybe it's a small family-owned business. Maybe it's a regional superpower, but you're trying to get a job on the other coast. You know what I mean? Like there's many variables there. So that's something you may want to think about. Would me adding a quick descriptor help people understand how this intersects with the company that I'm applying to? I'm going to give you another real world example. I work in aerospace, okay? I know who my competitors are. I make it my job to know who my competitors are. And there's very small companies, there's very random names, there's very companies that you have probably never heard of. I have them mapped out. I know who their CEO is. I know who all the players are. I have all the goods, right? But not all recruiters are going to do that. Not all companies care that much about their competition and wanting to scope that out. So if you know, hey, I am working for your competition and I can prove it, and here's the data behind it, here's the explanation behind it, that could be very helpful for recruiters who maybe missed your company. I don't want to say recruiters aren't doing their due diligence. Okay, fine. Some aren't. Okay? As much as I find that exercise valuable, I know not all recruiters do. A lot of people are like, if I want to know, I'll Google it. I love that. Many others are like, I don't have time to Google it. Just tell me. Wah, wah. You never know which recruiter you're going to get, friends. Be prepared for them all. But that's a good opportunity for you to use that little brief descriptor to make sure that it's very clear that, oh, hey, we're an aerospace company too. And hey, we're doing similar stuff with space exploration or manufacturing rockets or whatever it is you're doing. See where I'm going with this? Doesn't have to be rockets. I'm not manufacturing rockets. That's not what my company does. But anyway, so it might be helpful for you to just add some of those caveats. Okay, so to recap, do I work for a ginormous organization, but my flavor of work is very different, and I want to explain that? Add a descriptor. I work for a very small corporation that maybe people are not going to see the connection. Add a descriptor. If you are anti-descriptor, make sure you are somehow weaving those data points into your bullets where you are showcasing your skills, experiences, and superpowers. That's where I landed on this. I am firmly in the it depends camp. No surprise, that is usually the answer for most recruiting questions. But I do think, and I newly think this now after this discussion, so thank you to everyone who voted and weighed in. I do think there is a time and a place for this kind of information. As a job seeker, I'm going to encourage you, think about what resonates with you. Does this seem beneficial? Does this seem like an extra lift that you don't want to take? Is this something you can add quickly to a bullet? What have you? Try it out. I'm really curious if you are already doing something like this. Have you seen it help you? Has it been beneficial? Are you going to try it? Let me know the results. Maybe A/B test it a little bit. Wow, I added this. I got 10 times the responses. Yes, love that. Who knows where it's going to go? I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but I think it could be a really interesting experiment, especially if you are running into one of those issues. I said I work for Walmart. People think I'm a cashier. I work for this really cool, awesome company doing amazing things, but nobody's heard of us. Ugh. We can cover both of those scenarios and probably several in between. All right, friends, I hope that helps. Ask me anything down below in the comments if you want to discuss this more. I'm really, really curious what you think. Have you tried it? Are you going to try it? And, see what other fun polls we can come up with. This was a good one. I learned a lot. So thanks again for weighing in. Thanks for watching. And we will see you next week.